The President. Questions. Question 1, Mr. Kit and Young. There are views pointing out that Hong Kong's religious culture has a long history and is all-embracing, with traditional temples and monasteries such as Wong Tai Sin Temple, Shilin Nunnery, Manmo Temple, and Kwun Tong Temple, Kun Yam Temple in Hong Kong, which have preserved the beliefs and customs of different religious denominations. In addition to religiously sacred sites such as the Big Buddha, Poli Monastery, and Xishan Monastery, which have even become renowned tourist attractions in Hong Kong and attracted a large number of tourists and worshippers year after year, the government should therefore leverage the local religious and cultural heritage to promote the development of tourism. In this connection, will the government inform this council, 1, whether it will explore drawing up a religious and cultural map of Hong Kong in collaboration with the industry, so as to promote Hong Kong's diverse religious culture to the public, as well as mainland and overseas tourists through practical guiding information on religious tourism itineraries. 2, whether it will step up publicity on activities organized by local temples, monasteries, and religious institutions and promote the cultures of meditation and vegetarianism. And 3, whether it will consider producing online and offline games related to local religions, such as presenting badges to participants who have completed a visit to a religious attraction and unlocking the next visiting task for them, thereby offering lively and interesting ways for participants to visit all the religious attractions in Hong Kong. Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs. President, Hong Kong is an open and inclusive city in which religious freedom is the fundamental right enjoyed by Hong Kong residents as protected by the Basic Law and other relevant legislation. The government has been maintaining close liaison with religious groups and attends events organized by them with a view to promoting the communications with them and understanding their needs. In consultation with the CSTB, I give the consolidated reply to Mr. Kit and Young's question on behalf of the government as follows. The government has leveraged the diverse assets in town to promote tourism, including Chinese and Western cultural activities and festivals, the great outdoors and outlying islands, as well as traditions and customs of various religions and beliefs. On tourism experiences with religious elements, we showcase the traditional customs and attractions with authentic local characteristics to visitors and invite media and trade representatives to visit attractions with religious elements in person, including the Poli Monastery on Lantau Island, Tin Hau Temple in Nam Chong, Che Kung Temple in Sha Tin, and Tin Hau Temple in Lam Chun of Tai Po, and many more. We also produce TV shows and roll out thematic promotions to attract visitors to Hong Kong, especially among visitor source markets that share the culture of temple visits and traditional culture. Separately, the Culture and Promotion Working Group of the Chinese Temples Committee formulates publicity and promotion strategies and identifies key promotion activities on an annual basis, with a view to promoting Chinese traditional culture related to Chinese temples. In 2024-5, the committee has been working with organizations such as the Hong Kong Tourism Board, the Hong Kong Museum of History, and the Hong Kong Heritage Discovery Center, etc., in organizing talks, guided tours, and workshops on Chinese temple culture. The committee has also been organizing recurrent promotion activities, as well as funding and facilitating festive celebrations by organizations to promote Chinese temple culture to residents and visitors. In the Development Blueprint for Hong Kong's Tourism Industry 2.0, promulgated in December last year, it is mentioned that the government will focus on diversified development of religious tourism to enrich Hong Kong's tourism offerings, including engaging with religious groups to explore opening up religious venues as tourist attractions on a limited scale without affecting religious activities. The HYAB will assist in liaison with relevant religious groups to explore the feasible arrangements and actively collaborate with the CSTB's work. Thank you, President. Mr. Kit and Young. Thank you, President. First of all, I thank the Wong Tai Sin District Council. During the exchange with the LegCo, they raised the issue of promoting tourism themed on Chinese culture and religions. In many places and countries, there are cultural tourism in relation to religions. For example, the four-faced Buddha in Thailand. We have also just visited Putuo Mountain. It is a famous tourism attraction spot with some 440,000 visitors per day during the peak. Now, it brings some 24 billion RMB in revenue to Busan every year. Now, we have a lot of religious sects. We have some 400 monasteries and nunneries, some with 700 years of history. For example, the Tianhao Temple in Futangmen. Mr. Kisan Yang, please raise your question. I'm going through. There are lots of religious activities. For example, the 66 Institute, there is a cultural festival for believers of the Wang Daixin Temple. These are unique traveling experience. Secretary, my question is, with all of these cultural tourism aspects, how can we promote the resources we have through the Xiaohongshu or Red Note or other social media platform to encourage visitors to get a taste of the Chinese culture and bring revenue to the sector? Which government official will answer the question? I will first give a response and invite my colleague to supplement. Now, the government has set aside funding to establish the Cultural and Heritage Sites Local Tour Incentive Scheme, encouraging innovative itineraries comprising cultural and religious elements. Now, there are travel agencies in the market organizing itineraries with religious elements. The Tourism Board will also offer an ultimate guide for the upcoming Chinese New Year for visitors. Now, like Mr. Kisan Yang said, the Tourism Board will upload video clips via social media platform to promote local religious activities, for example, paying tribute at the Wang Daixin Temple or Che-Gong Temple. Under Secretary for CST, thank you, President. As mentioned by Ms. Alice Mack, the Tourism Board has been working hard to promote various local tourism packages to local and overseas visitors. On various occasions, members have urged the government to offer tourism packages involving the financial industry, blue and green tourism, outlying islands, and rural ambience, and so on. We are working on all these. On religious and cultural tourism, we have been working with overseas social media to organize visits to Hong Kong. We have brought media figures and artists to film TV shows at Che-Gong Temple and also the Buddha Gate in Sai Kung. And also, we have collaborated with cartoon artists to design thematic smartphone desktops featuring famous cartoon characters in our religious sites. Now, the Tourism Board has also offered an ultimate guide for temple visits comprising 25 temples and also tips for visitors paying tribute. Of course, we can always do better and do more. But we may have to balance the priorities in our work. Ms. Chen Yuming. Thank you, President. As mentioned in the main reply, we are an open and inclusive city in which religious freedom is a fundamental right, and there are lots of religious values. We have the traditional Chinese religions, we have the Western Christianity, and also Muslim religions. Now, religious sites are an important element in our city walk itinerary. So what measures will the Tourism Board adopt to promote intellectual properties involving cultural and religious elements to enhance the experience for visitors? Under Secretary for CST. Thank you. As I've mentioned, we would like to encourage more organizations and stakeholders to participate in promoting our tourism brand. In terms of promoting cultural and religious tourism, we adopt the same principle. We are very open to working with religious bodies to open the religious venues as tourist attractions without affecting their religious activities. We are willing to remove red tape if need be to promote these religious activities. In fact, the Hong Kong Tourism Board has been working with many religious bodies in organizing some tourism activities. Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, President. We have a long history of religion in Hong Kong. We are open and inclusive, and this is a major characteristic of Hong Kong. Many religious venues are heritage sites with a very rich historical background. They are very famous and very attractive to tourists. After the pandemic, in the first study visits I conducted with the tourism industry, the destination was Macau. I was deeply impressed. The Church of Rose, a Catholic church, was used to host a performance of Chinese music. Now, that tells us how much we can achieve by collaborating different elements in our resources. Now, in the main reply, the government says it will collaborate with religious bodies to open their religious venues for tourist attractions. Now, I wonder whether there are internal mechanisms established to work with the religious bodies to promote opening up religious venues for visitors and let them have a taste of our unique culture. Which government official will take the question? President, I thank Mr. Perry Yu for his question. This is a great idea. We've always attached importance to promoting our characteristic of an inclusive religious culture. In hosting various events, we have been working closely with religious bodies. For example, in other city, a music performance may be held in a church. Actually, we have busking performances in the Wang Dai Xin Temple. We have been working with religious bodies to organize activities with district characteristics to diversify the traveling experience for visitors. The HYAB plays a liaison role between the religious bodies. As mentioned in my main reply, we will support the CSTB in its efforts to promote tourism. And play a liaison role between the government and the religious bodies. As mentioned by my colleague, the Tourism Board has been promoting tourist attractions to visitors, many of which are related to our religious culture. For example, the Wanwu Temple in Shangwan and the Tin Hao Temple. Innovative methods of paying tribute have been introduced for these venues to diversify the experience. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. Now, in relation to religious tourism, meditation is a big market. If you look at Taiwan, religious bodies are very active in contributing to preservation of local culture and even developing tourism attractions. Now, we have a lot of temples in Hong Kong, but Lantau is unique. It is an especially ideal place for monastery visits and meditation activities. Now, I've conducted a study before about that. So my question is, concerning the wide array of meditation venues in Lantau, how about involving various religious bodies to help develop the segments in Lantau. Undersecretary. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Andrew Lam for his suggestion. We are aware of that as well. Mr. Lam mentioned about meditation activities in monastery in Lantau. It's a great retreat for visitors. Actually, in temples of all sizes in Hong Kong, there are meditative activities being held. Now, as I mentioned in my main reply, we are going to liaise with the religious bodies on the premise that their religious activities are not affected. Diversified traveling experience or activities can be provided to local and overseas visitors. Now, meditative activity has become trendy. We are aware of that. Some religious groups have shared their experience with us, how they are making available their religious venues for this kind of activities. So this is what we have been working on. In short, we are aware of the trend, and if religious bodies are willing to offer their venues for this kind of activities, we are willing to provide assistance. Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, President. Thank you, Secretary. In terms of cultural and religious tourism, the religion of Muslim is important. Now, besides the 3 Muslim temples run by the official organization, there are all sorts of Muslim temples in Hong Kong. So there are 30,000 Muslims in Hong Kong. Now, starting from 2001, the Kowloon Mosque and Islamic Center was established, and the one in Wan Chai even has a longer history than that. They even offer a traditional tea offering in the mosque. So how can we work with them to promote the tourism package? Which government official will answer the question? Under Secretary for CST. Thank you, President. If religious bodies are open to the idea of offering up their venues to diversify the traveling experience for visitors, we are willing to cooperate. Now, for example, at the Wang Dai Sin Temple, there are LED walls for paying tributes, and there is also digitalized holography. So we are willing to work with them to promote their attractions. Same goes for the Muslim community. The government is willing to work with it. At the same time, we do encourage travel agencies to reach out to the governments if they found that a certain attractions is particularly attractive to tourists. And we will implement measures to attract tourists to these venues without affecting the religious activities. Mr. Shanghai Long, thank you, President. Now, Hong Kong is a melting pot between the East and West. We have freedom of religion. This is one of our greatest strengths. We need to dig deeper to utilize this strength. Now, frankly speaking, compared with the mainland and other places, the history of our religious sites don't go as far back. Now, compared with other historical religious venues in other places, it would be better if we collaborate with them. In 2004, the Association of Buddhism in Hong Kong arranged for the exhibition of a Buddhist relics to be exhibited in Hong Kong. It had a great impact. Please raise your question, Mr. Chang. Now, my question is, now a gold chess champion residing in Hong Kong mentioned that we can combine religious culture, the culture of religion, and go chess. Now, if we can organize an invitation championship for invitation tournaments for Go chess in the Holy Monastery in Lantau, we may be able to promote our religious resources. Secretary, I thank Mr. Jesse Shang for his suggestion. In fact, many temples would like to attract various activities to be held in their venues. Mr. Shang mentioned the Pauline Monastery in Lantau. Now, actually, the monastery would like to broadcast the New Year bell ringing ceremony to the wider public via broadcasters. Also, they have collaborated with designers and other religious bodies in the mainland to enhance the impact of their ceremony. So in reply to Mr. Shang's question, I know that a lot of religious bodies would like to fully utilize their venues to promote their own culture or religious beliefs. The government will give our full support for these religious bodies to host these activities so as to promote the Chinese culture and enrich the experience for visitors.
Second question, Dr. So Cheung-wing. President, I must make a declaration that my company is providing commercial services at West Kowloon Cultural District. I am putting this question from the point of view of enhancing the service. The WKCD is one of the largest cultural projects in the world and most important base for cultural experience in Hong Kong, which often attracts huge number of people and visitors. However, the existing public transport routes plying WKCD are insufficient and rather infrequent, and the walking distance from MTR to the galleries is long, and there is a lack of parking spaces for private vehicles, causing inconvenience to tourists and people working there. In this connection, will government inform this council, one, of the respective number of public transport routes plying between WKCD and the Hong Kong West Kowloon station of the express rail link, as well as between WKCD and MTR Austin station at present, the frequency of the services, whether there are special traffic arrangements on Saturdays, Sundays, and during major festivals. 2, whether it has considered providing public parking or hourly parking spaces in WKCD to meet the demand for parking, if so, of the timetable, if not, the reasons for that. And 3, how will the administration solve the problem of inconvenient public transport in WKCD to better bring into play its functions? Secretary for Transport and Logistics. President, the West Kowloon Cultural District, WKCD, is an important strategic cultural infrastructure investment of the government, with more than 20 arts and cultural facilities and venues for mega events. The WKCD is not only a popular choice for public to participate in cultural activities and spend their leisure time, but also one of the must-see attractions for tourists. The government and the WKCDA have all along attached importance to enhancing connectivity of the WKCD to cope with the flow of visitors. Having consulted the CSTB and the WKCDA, our reply in response is as follows. First, we encourage members of the public and tourists to make use of the diversified and convenient public transport to access the WKCD, including MTR, 6 franchise bus routes, 5 green minibus routes, and water taxi. At present, franchise buses and GMBs provide services to or from the WKCD via different districts on the Hong Kong Island and in Kowloon, as well as Zhongguanou and in the NT. Information is sent out at the annex. The above franchise bus routes also include 3 tourist routes that offer tourist day passes linking Hong Kong and the WKCD for the convenience of the visitors. Members of the public and the tourists may also make use of some 25 bus routes passing through the West Kowloon or Western Harbour crossings and alight at the bus interchange of the Kowloon exit or entrance of the tunnel and walk for about 5 to 10 minutes to reach WKCD. GMB route number CX1 and KMB number W4 currently provide services for journeys between WKCD and West Kowloon Station of the Express Rail, as well as MTR Austin Station. The usual headway for GMB route CX1 is 10 minutes. The operator will increase the frequency subject to passenger demand, enhance the headway to 6 minutes during peak hours, and set off when seats are filled. KMB W4 provides services on Saturdays, Sundays, and public holidays with a headway of 15 to 20 minutes. The TD will maintain communication with WKCDA and liaise with the franchise bus and GMB operators to suitably increase the frequency and extend the service hours in the light of passenger demand. According to TD's understanding, these two routes can adequately meet the demand. Moreover, water taxi, which mainly provide tourists with sightseeing and tourism services, berths at West Kowloon on Saturdays, Sundays, and public holidays to provide services to Tsim Sha Tsui East, Wan Chai, and Central. The government is constructing a southern landing facility opposite to M+, which is expected to be completed within this year. By then, the berthing point of water taxi in West Kowloon will be relocated to the new landing facility to provide passengers with more convenient waterborne service. The government and WKCDA will maintain close communication with the water taxi operator and enhance services where necessary. To facilitate the members of the public and tourists to visit the WKCD, the TD and WKCDA have installed additional directional signs and signage at major roads leading to the WKCD and within the district to provide clear information. In addition, the Austin Road pedestrian link system as well as the Artist Square Bridge were put into service in March and December 2021 respectively. This has greatly enhanced the overall accessibility between WKCD and nearby stations. After alighting at the MTR Kowloon Station or MTR Austin Station, visitors can walk for about 10 to 15 minutes to the WKCD. In the case of large-scale activities, such as fireworks display, the police will implement temporary traffic arrangement as necessary, including road closure in the WKCD and its vicinity. During the road closure, the visitors can walk to the MTR stations or nearby places to take public transport after the end of the activities. For major festivals in the past 2 years, the arrangements have been working smoothly. 2. Regarding parking, there are 5 car parks in the WKCD, providing a total of 650 parking spaces for private cars. Through the WKCD mobile app, the government's mobile app, HKE Mobility, and the electronic display panels on the roads nearby, motorists will know in real time the number of parking spaces available at the WKCD. The MTR Kowloon Station and West Kowloon Station of the XRL also provide around 260 and 500 spaces respectively. The West K Performing Arts Center is under construction and will be completed next year in 2026. By then, about 230 additional spaces will be provided. In the long run, the WKCDA will continue to increase the supply of public parking through new venues and development projects. 3. The government will continue to liaise with WKCDA to keep the traffic conditions under review and strengthen the accessibility of the WKCD through diversified and convenient public transport network, together with the enhancement in dissemination of information on public transport as well as parking, visits to the WKCD will be more convenient. Thank you, President. Dr. So. Thank you, Secretary, for her reply. From her reply, it seems there are no problems at all. I hope that you would be alive to the views and demands of the members of the public and the tourists. From the point funding was earmarked, it's been 17 years. Today we have M+, a free space, CG Center, and Art Park. They've become operational. And the West K Performing Arts Center will be coming on stream in 2026. Now we have all these world-class performing and cultural venues. The public transport is far from adequate, and this is really unthinkable. And the circular route provided by WKCDA has been dispensed with. The WKCDA also feels that the transport facilities are inadequate. So my question is, when will the administration be providing regular bus routes plying between WKCD and bus stops? And will there be travelators leading from the MTR station to the WKC instead of having people walking for 10 to 15 minutes? Secretary. Thanks very much, Dr. So. There are two parts. First, about public transport, like Dr. So said. As the WKCDA is organizing more activities, and indeed this is a popular sport. I've mentioned some of the franchise bus routes and the green minibus services. We are also liaising closely with the WKCDA. We believe that there is a need to provide circular routes linking up with the nearby MTR station, taking the tourists to the WKCD. Now we have CX1 and W4 by KMB. Other than these, there are three sightseeing routes, HK1, CTB, H2, and H2K. Now these three tourist routes cover quite a number of spots, and it will take a pretty long time. In future, we hope that for these sightseeing routes, we would strengthen them in order to take passengers all the way to the WKCD. And for CX1, green minibus, it covers some of the important venues of WKCD. We will be strengthening the services to cater for the demand and concerns alluded to by Dr. So. Second, walking. The WKCD is a nice open space. We do encourage the members of the public and the tourists to make their way there on foot. The TD, WKCDA, and the MTRC have also provided signage taking people there. And we do need to provide the most direct route so that when they get off the express rail, once they get out of the station, there would be clear direct route taking them there to the WKCD. We will be strengthening this going forward. Mr. CHIU, President, an accessible transport network is pivotal to enhancing the vitality of the WKCD. The transport network, or lack thereof, is something that is of concern to many people. As the Secretary said, we have the MTRC, we have the water taxi, green minibuses, and franchise buses. If the services are good enough, there would not have been so much grievances or dissatisfaction on the part of the tourists and members of the public. I know that the government is taking forward some projects to improve their accessibility. But my question is, the WKCDA did provide a shuttle bus service for free. Now that has been discontinued. It was suggested that because the public transport network has been improved, and that's why the circular route has to go. But like the Secretary said, there is only one additional green minibus and an additional KMB bus on public holidays and Sundays, and the range of choice is still rather limited. To facilitate access to WKCD, will this free shuttle bus be reinstated? Secretary? Thanks very much, Mr. Chen, for the question. The WKCDA, after the opening of the border, and there are more passengers, and they have provided a shuttle bus from the express rail, and the TD has noticed the surge in demand, and all the public transport services that I mentioned have been provided. We keep our options open here, and through the CSTB and the WKCDA, we will be paying close attention to the increase in footfall, and during significant events and festivities where there is an upsurge in demand, like the Winter Fest, Christmas Town, and also the firework display. Green minibuses alone will not be the answer to the problem. Green minibuses are flexible. They can depart as soon as they are filled. But we will have a look at the situation if the franchised buses, now they do cover different locations and different stops. If we can strengthen the provision of the franchise buses to cover shorter routes to provide the circular services, we are only delighted to do so. As to whether the WKCDA would consider, on top of the public transport, whether there would be additional free shuttle buses, I will be only too happy to take these to the CSTB and the WKCD for discussion to provide better services. Mr. Scott Leung, President, in answer to Dr. So's question, the Secretary said that the connectivity for pedestrians is also important, other than the public transport. Now, from Tai Kok Tsui to WKCD, the waterfront is going to be opened, and we also have the deck of the central route. This is linking up with the WKCD. In the plan, that this deck at Ferry Street is not sufficient as signage, and people have to wait for a long time to make the crossing. And there are some suggestions that that particular road crossing or the deck area can be improved so that the pedestrians can walk all the way to Temple Street, the fruit market, and the Yamate police station. So my question for the Secretary is, will you be prepared to listen to public views to improve the connectivity with the gallery deck to improve the access to the WKCD? Secretary, thanks very much for the suggestion. This is well worth considering. The Central Kowloon route, upon completion, will be provided with many different attractions, and this is close to the express rail station. And this is connected with some other MTR stations and public transport interchange. It's not the case that it's not sufficient signage. It's just that people don't have the idea how the entire walking route can be planned. And you mentioned the Yaojimbong district. There are still also other attractions. Now we can certainly consider this circle of attractions to facilitate people not just to go to the WKCD but also to these different attractions. We are using the bus routes, the WKCD, and the attractions in the vicinity will be covered. But in terms of walking, we can certainly strengthen these. I will have a look at this when I go back, and by the time the Central Kowloon route is up and running, this will be a setting point. Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, President. Since 2013, the WKCD has been around for quite a number of years. Now, the waterfront is not connected with Tsim Sha Tsui, so people find it difficult to make their way there. Will the administration give us any timetable how soon the ocean terminal or the waterfront from ocean terminal to WKCD will be opened? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Yim. The government department, CEDD, the TD, and all the rest of the departments have been working really hard to improve the accessibility on the waterfront. To take passengers from Tsim Sha Tsui East to the WKCD, other than walking, we do provide the water taxi service. People can board the water taxi to go to WKCD. And outside, and plus the construction of the landing facilities, the construction is in full swing, and this berthing facility will facilitate this embarkation of the passengers there. Mr. Chan Pui-leung. At Kowloon Station, there are a number of green minibuses covering Mong Kok, Tsim Sha Tsui, and To Kwa Wan. Now, with WKCD being commissioned, these routes will have to go via the WKCD, and passengers will have to spend an awful long time on the journey. So will the operators be providing the point-to-point service from the station to the WKCD so that the routes, the original routes, don't really have to take circuitous route, thus inconveniencing the passengers? Secretary, in terms of green minibus, I think it's a question of how we distribute the resources. In the annex to the reply, there are 5 green minibuses serving the district, and this would meet the commute needs of the passengers. And we would look at the passenger flow and passenger load at the moment, and we are able to meet the demand. As there is an upsurge in passengers during certain significant events, we will be liaising with the operators for them to be more flexible without compromising the services. We hope that these will also cater for WKCD. So CX1, this circular route, is one of the focal points that would take passengers to WKCD.
Question 3, Mr. Yim Kong. President, there are views pointing out that the supporting documents for ownership of real estates in Hong Kong, which often comprise hundreds to thousands of pages, cause great inconvenience to ownership holders in terms of storage and safekeeping. Additional costs are also incurred for depositing the relevant documents in safe deposit boxes in banks, and it's difficult to make up for the damage or loss of the documents due to dampness, aging of paper, infestation by pests, fires, or moving of homes. The aforesaid problems have, to a certain extent, restricted the circulation of ownership. In this connection, will the government inform this council 1. As it is learned that in the event of damage or loss of supporting documents for real estate, even if certified copies of assignments, commonly known as photocopied deeds, are obtained as replacement through law firms, the titles will still be regarded as incomplete, which may affect property prices and mortgage applications. Whether the government has reviewed if photocopied deeds approved by the Land Registry have the legal effect of proving full titles in the market. 2. Of the number of applications made by members of the public to the Land Registry for photocopied deeds in the past 3 years and the main reasons for such applications. And 3. Whether it has considered comprehensively promoting the digitalization of proof of ownership of fixed assets such as houses, land, and vehicles. If so, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for Development. President. The current land registration system in Hong Kong is a deeds registration system, under which the proof of property ownership must comply with the common law and the requirements of Cap 219, Conveyancing and Property Ordinance. In terms of ordinary property sale and purchase, the vendor must provide the original title deeds relating to property transactions dating back at least 15 years for the purchaser's solicitor to review in order to confirm that the vendor is the true owner of the property. The title deeds relating to property transactions hereby refer to government land grant, sale and purchase, assignment, mortgage instruments, etc. Under this system, the purchaser obtains title by executing a valid assignment with the vendor after the title is verified, and therefore proof of title is not based on one single document. After completion of the property transaction, the purchaser has possession of the title deeds, and where the property is mortgaged, the title deeds are kept by the mortgagee bank until the mortgage loan is repaid. For each property transaction, the purchaser's solicitor will deliver the original transaction instruments to the Land Registry for registration. The registry will make and keep image records for each registered instrument and return the original instruments to the purchaser's solicitor after registration is completed. Against this backdrop, in relation to the 3 parts of the question raised by Mr. Yim Kong, my response is as follows. 1. Under the current deeds registration system, that is the system that I mentioned about, it is essential for property owner to retain the physical original title deeds. The registry's role in property transactions and ownership verification is to register instruments, provide property search services, and provide copies or certified copies of registered instruments. In cases of loss of title deeds, we are aware of the court's ruling that if there is doubt on the property owner's title arising from missing title deeds, the property owner needs to provide satisfactory evidence to remove the doubt. What is regarded as satisfactory depends on the circumstances of the particular case. In many cases, a statutory declaration explaining why the title deeds are missing, accompanied with certified copies of the required title deeds and documents, may be regarded as title being established. 2. In the past 3 financial years, the average annual number of certified copies of land instruments provided by the Land Registry is 99,000. The instruments concerned are mostly orders issued by the government concerning building matters and government land grant documents, with instruments relating to assignments only constituting a very small percentage, about 3%. Since an applicant is not required to provide the reason for obtaining a certified copy from the registry, we do not keep information on the reasons for application. 3. Under the current deeds registration system, the title to a property is ascertained through the provision and checking of title deeds. As mentioned, under the current system, we cannot rely on one single document, be it e-copy or paper copy, prove the ownership or the title. the government is preparing to introduce a title registration system to gradually replace the current deeds registration system, starting with newly granted land. In this connection, we will, in the first quarter of 2025, introduce an amendment bill into the LegCo to amend the Land Titles Ordinance. Under the new system, the title register is conclusive evidence of title, and title to property can be ascertained through search of the title register without the need to go through past title documents, like what people have to do now. Accordingly, upon implementation of the ordinance for newly granted land, checking or keeping of a series of title documents as under the current system will no longer be necessary. This also addresses the problems arising from the loss of original title documents. Under the title registration system, the title register itself is sufficient proof of title. Even so, in response to the public's wish to hold a paper title certificate, the Land Registry will in future issue a paper title certificate to property owners in respect of land under the title registration system, and a copy of the certificate will be kept in the registry electronically. Generally speaking, the registry will issue one title certificate of generally 1 to 2 pages for each property. In respect of proof of ownership of vehicles, the Transport and Logistics Bureau indicated that particulars of registered vehicles are currently stored electronically in the Transport Department's computer licensing system. The vehicle registration document is an important document issued by the TD to the registered owner of a vehicle, which contains the personal particulars of the registered owner and the registration details of his or her vehicle. As the implementation of full digitalization of the vehicle registration document involves a number of considerations, including regulation, technology and system security, acceptance of the community, and so on, the government needs to study carefully the appropriateness and practicability to meet the needs and expectations of the public and the industry. Thank you. Mr. Yim Kong, President, in his 2024 policy address, the Chief Executive says we have to facilitate digital transformation, and this will help us drive the physical growth of our economy as well as the digital growth of our economy. There might be historical issues that the government has to settle. Will the government roll out pilot schemes, for example? Perhaps the digitalization scheme could be implemented through the HOS scheme launched by the Housing Society. Thank you. Secretary, on ownership of real estate property, in a lot of the economies, we haven't yet seen full digitalization without paper proof. This is because title deeds are still a very important piece of document. We have been using paper title deeds for many years. If we switch to the e-system now, we have to be prudent. As mentioned in the main reply, we are going to introduce the title registration system, and it's the first step. We will have to convert years of title deeds we've kept into digital forms, and there will be a record of your title in the land registry. With the transaction records in the future, you'll only have to update the future transaction or transaction records, and this will help save a lot of work. After we take the first step, we will continue to review the level of acceptance in other economies as well as in Hong Kong before we decide whether we should go fully digital. I believe it will take us some time to have a discussion. It has taken us many years to discuss with the relevant stakeholders before we introduce this new system. Mr. Chang Kin-po, the government is going to introduce a title registration system to replace the existing deeds system. And in 2024, the government will introduce the amendment bill into LegCo. I support this proposal because it will save us a lot of work as well as procedures. The Secretary said there is plan for the government to cover the existing properties under the new registration system. It will depend on the progress in other economies as well as the discussions in the community level. I hope the government will come up with a timetable soon. When will members of the public be able to do away with the stack of paper deeds, and when will they be able to not rely on the safe deposit boxes? Secretary, we're going to adopt an easy first and difficult later approach. For newly granted land, we refer to land granted by way of land exchange as well as land sale. So there should be fewer controversies or disputes in relation to this new land. In relation to existing land, we are to cover them in the new registration system. We have to first examine all the existing title deeds to ascertain the ownership and titles. Also, during the procedure, say there are mistakes made and the title is registered erroneously, then there might be indemnity or compensation involved, and we'll have to set an amount for the compensation. We'll have to talk to the real estate property as well as the insurance sector and so on about this, because it is a topic that is close to our heart. It is for sure that we will carry on with the new registration system. We hope that with the start we'll be able to convert the title to the new system. Mr. Paul Che. Say the municipal waste charging scheme, it was suspended. And this land titles ordinance was enacted some 20 years ago. And 20 years later, we are still facing all these problems. I hope within the current term government, within the first quarter of this year, the bill could be tabled to LegCo. I talked about this in 2018, and back then the then secretary mentioned that it would introduce the system, but we are yet to see the system. I want to ask about the two-stage conversion mechanism. Will the new land be included in the new system first, and then we deal with the other land so that you can catch up with the lost time? Thank you. Secretary. Indeed, the land titles ordinance has existed for some time, but we weren't able to implement this title registration system in the past 20 years. People care about property transactions and purchase and sales of properties, and we don't want to see any mistakes in this regard. It's not that we can only rely on the government to introduce this new system. We spent a lot of time to communicate with the relevant stakeholders. Today, we propose that we introduce the new system to newly granted land. The two-stage conversion mechanism will not be covered in the first phase of the system or the amendment bill, because we won't have to verify the title of the existing land with the newly granted land to be dealt with first. As mentioned, we will continue to communicate with the relevant stakeholders in relation to the conversion mechanism in terms of when we can convert the existing land titles. I believe we will see some progress. Dr. Simon Lee, thank you. The government plans to digitalize the documents for ownership of fixed assets with the amendment with the bill in relation to critical infrastructure safety. Will there be a mechanism in place to ensure the safety of these supporting documents as well? Secretary, for the first phase, we are referring to conversion of titles. That means when there are new transactions in the future, we can, through the land registry, register the titles without having to go through the paperwork or rely on the paper deeds for verification and searches. That means we're going to digitalize the title deeds, and we will carry out the transactions through the e-title deeds. So when I replied to Mr. Yim Kong's questions, I mentioned that in future we will not be signing paper title deeds because they will all be in digital forms, and even for land deeds or land leases, they all will be in electronic forms. As far as we understand, apart from Singapore, that is more advanced in this regard, the other economies are still more or less at the same stage. We need to verify the titles through our computing system, and we have to ensure that there is a level of safety with our computing system if we want to digitalize our title deeds. This is an issue that we'll have to face as we are going through this digital era. So we won't have to deal with the existing deeds yet with the amendment bill. Dr. Wendy Hong. Newly granted land will be dealt with first under the new title registration system. My question is it the case that for each transaction you will bring in the new title registration system? Because every time you have to ascertain the title when there's a transaction. Secretary, according to our policy direction as well as the amendment bill that we're going to introduce, for all newly granted land, it will be our starting point to introduce the title registration system. Say we are selling a plot of land in Kai Tak, and for this plot of land, for all the buildings built on this piece of land, all the transactions involved will have to be done under the new title registration system. So it's not that people can choose whether they want to stick to the old system or the new system. Ms. Eunice Young, 60% of the properties in Hong Kong are without mortgages. Some owners, after they've repaid their mortgage, they will take the title deeds back from the bank. And for their children or next generation, it's hard for them to retrieve the paper title deeds. I know that you are going to implement the new system in 2 phases. For the first phase, that's the amendment bill. And the title deeds of the newly granted land will be digitalized. I'm asking you about the existing title deeds. It's not that you have to go fully digital now. I'm asking about whether there can be a registration system to cover the existing title deeds. I can at least register my existing title deeds with the government now to make sure that even if I lose it, there won't be any problems. Secretary. As mentioned in part 1 of my main reply, say during our verification process of the title, some owners tell us that they have lost their title deeds and we cannot ascertain the ownership or the title. Then according to our existing system, the owner will have to tell the court the reasons for them to lose the title. These owners can go to the land registry, which can help them ascertain the title. Say some people tell me that they have all the paper deeds, but they are afraid that they would lose them. Can they go to the land registry and have the title deed scanned or photocopied and have those copies or have the original title deeds kept at the land registry? Well, it seems like a simple concept because you're simply photocopying the original documents. However, we're saying now that the original documents in all cities under the common law system, they are very important. So we have to create a system. Then we have to photocopy the original documents and have someone ascertain that these are certified copies and make sure that these certified copies will be kept safely. Well, this will take a lot of effort. That's why we're introducing this new title registration system, to make sure that it will cover newly granted land as a first step. This is also to simplify the registration procedure. If we come up with another system to deal with the photocopies, it might be very time-consuming or troublesome.
Question for Mr. Duncan CHIU. Thank you. The government set up the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio, Hong Kong GP, in 2020 and subsequently appointed 8 private equity firms as general partners to make strategic investments. In this connection, will the government inform this council, one, of the identification process for Hong Kong GP partners, the selection criteria, including whether priority will be given to teams with experience of investing in local innovation and technology I&T projects, and the monitoring mechanism, whether it will regularly review and improve the relevant process criteria and mechanism, if so, of the areas in which adjustments will be made. 2. It is learned that some partners have yet to make investments and have not even set up offices and investment teams in Hong Kong. How the government will follow up, including whether it will consider recovering the uninvested funds for allocation to other partners. And 3, as the government indicated in 2022 that Hong Kong GP's returns would be disclosed 5 years after its operation, and the arrangements for regular disclosure would also be considered then, whether the government has given instructions to the partners in this regard and what follow-up actions it will take, including whether it will conduct a comprehensive assessment of the partners' investment strategies and performance prior to making the return disclosure formally, what measures the government has in place to ensure that the partners make good use of the funds to maximize investment returns. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, the Financial Secretary announced in the 2020-21 budget that 10% of the future fund, that is 22 billion. Sorry, I think you have to adjust your microphone. Would be deployed for the establishment of the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio, Hong Kong GP. The Hong Kong SAR government has established a 2-tier governance framework, that is, the Governance Committee and the Investment Committee. The Investment Committee formulated the criteria for the selection of investment managers based on the investment criteria set by the Governance Committee and appointed general partners based on these criteria. The appointed general partners are responsible for identifying projects and investing. From the inception of the Hong Kong GP to the end of 2022, the Investment Committee has appointed general partners by batches. The appointment arrangements were implemented since 2022, and the investment work commenced in an orderly manner. In the 2022 policy address, the Chief Executive announced the establishment of the Hong Kong Investment Corporation Limited, Hong Kong IC, to consolidate the Hong Kong GP, the GBA Investment Fund, the Strategic Tech Fund, and the Co-Investment Fund, pulling together resources with the government in a leading role in attracting and facilitating more enterprises to develop in Hong Kong. As patient capital, the Hong Kong IC carries a dual mandate, supporting the development of Hong Kong's INT as well as strategic industries through investment, thereby enhancing Hong Kong's long-term competitiveness and economic vitality while seeking reasonable risk-adjusted returns over the medium to long term. Since establishment, the Hong Kong IC has made more than 80 investments focusing on hard and core technology, biotechnology, new energy, and green technology. In consultation with Hong Kong IC, my reply to the question is as follows. 1. The objective of Hong Kong GP is to make strategic investments in projects with a Hong Kong nexus, with a view to reinforcing Hong Kong as an international financial trading and INT center, as well as enhancing productivity and competitiveness in the long run, while seeking reasonable risk-adjusted returns. Considering that the Hong Kong GP focuses on long-term investment, the investment committee, in selecting general partners, consider not only their past performance in private equity and venture capital markets, such as the internal rate of return, IRR, multiple of invested capital and loss ratio, but also whether the company has sufficient capacity to identify investments that are conducive to the long-term development from a number of perspectives, including whether the company concerned is headquartered in Hong Kong or has established an office of a certain size, whether the company is able to be committed to contributing to the long-term development and putting forward an action plan accordingly, and whether the company has extensive and successful experience in investing in Hong Kong and in the GPA. The investment committee communicated with the appointed general partners and reviewed their investment progress reports regularly. Since the new team of the Hong Kong IC came on board in October 2023, it has reviewed and updated the investment requirements and arrangements for the different portfolios under its purview, including the preferred mode of making direct and co-investments to maximize the contribution to Hong Kong from each of the investments. 2. General partners are required to invest in projects with a Hong Kong nexus. The specific investment strategies vary in focus, hence the pace of investment differs. At present, all general partners of the Hong Kong GP have offices and investment teams in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong IC will continue to closely monitor the operations of the 4 funds and update the relevant arrangements in a timely manner so as to meet the development direction and needs of Hong Kong. 3. As the Hong Kong GP focuses on long-term investment, it is appropriate to consider factors such as long-term return and strategic contribution when assessing its performance. With the new team of the Hong Kong IC coming on board gradually and relevant work fully laid out starting last year, the Hong Kong IC will publish its first annual report to announce its operations, including the progress of its investments in the Hong Kong GP in 2025. Thank you. Mr. Duncan CHIU. First, I declare that I am the founder and the shareholder of a Hong Kong investment fund company. Well, to make investments for the Hong Kong GP as a general partner is something that we support. We need to have these partners. I've asked people from the industry. The government for quite some time did not disclose its investment return is a market criterion. It is supported. The appointed general partners, do they have experience in investing in technology? Questions are asked. Well, the reply covers the identification process and the criteria and the fact that these partners are experienced. I do think they can be relied upon. Well, the names of the general partners under the Hong Kong GP are not disclosed. INT companies come to Hong Kong often ask me, they want to know who these general partners are because they want to invest with these companies. but the names are not disclosed. So how do these prospective investors contact them? When it comes to IT venture fund and other types of fund companies, the government disclosed their names, the names of the companies or the investment teams. How come that for such a long time the names of general partners are not disclosed? Secretary. When the Hong Kong GP came into existence, we consider the sensitive information involved. So if there is any chance that the information being disclosed may affect the investment plan of the partners, then it is better not to disclose them. That's why we have decided on this. So without disclosing the names of the general partners, can they continue to source and identify projects? The Hong Kong IC has been talking to these firms, and these firms are quite active in sourcing investments. So the fact that their names are not disclosed, their investment is not affected. From the perspective of a supply, well, if you want to approach these partners for certain investment projects, well, then you can go to the Hong Kong IC. It is a one-stop platform. Through communication with these partners, the information can be passed on. The investment teams of these partners will make the decision and will take the information into account. So the demand and supply sides are not affected in their investment work simply because the names are not disclosed. Mr. Edmund Wong. Mr. Chiu asked the question about the information not being disclosed. In the reply, it said that these partners will have to invest in projects with the Hong Kong nexus, but the focus and strategies are different, hence the pace is different too. But there is no direct reply to the question. My question is, in 2022, starting from 2022, there are general partners appointed, but if investments are not made by individual general partners, then it is not a growth portfolio, it is a super conservative portfolio. Can the government confirm if there are any partners that have not invested a cent? Well, has the government do its part to ensure that investments have been made appropriately? The question covers a number of areas. First, the communication and work between the Hong Kong IC and the general partners. As I said, that the Hong Kong IC has been closely communicating with these partners. So if they are considering to invest in certain projects, and then they will refer to the mandate given by the government. The communication work has not stopped. General partners have been appointed. The mandate given to them is also very clear, so they have to take into account the investment requirements as well as the nexus with Hong Kong, in particular relating to enhancing Hong Kong's competitiveness and economic vitality in the long run. But these are the factors to be taken into account when they make the investment. In relation to the investment situation, referring to my reply, that we are looking at medium to long-term investment. We have to look at the long term, and we have to be fully prepared in the short term. And these are the principles of the Hong Kong IC. In the annual report, you will find relevant information. If we have to make disclosure of the investment in the short term, it may not be completely consistent with our long-term goals. Mr. Tan Yue Hang. Thank you, President. The Hong Kong GP is a long-term investment. It is a patient capital. I understand that there are 8 appointed general partners. They are our long-term partners, but the industry itself is very competitive. There are different cycles. Some are good, some are bad. In different cycles, there may be quality in firms being conceived. So if there are quality investment firms in a new cycle, will the government consider appointing new partners? Mr. Tan's question covers a number of areas. First, when the general partners were appointed, what were the criteria? Well, we consider that they have experience in investment. The goal of the Hong Kong GP is very clear, which is to find investment that is related to Hong Kong. That is very important. We also look at their past performance. In particular, experience and returns in INT or different investment areas. The Hong Kong IC has been communicating with these partners to ensure that they have met the requirements to invest in projects with a Hong Kong nexus. Mr. Tang also asked about possible changes in new firms in the market. When the partners have been appointed, one of the requirements is that relevant persons in charge will have to have investment experience. If there is a change in personnel, say if they no longer make investment decisions, then we would take that into account. If the relevant persons in charge in a particular partner is an important decision in our selection, if there are changes, then we may make changes. So if there are new projects, can we find new firms to take up the work? On the 30th of December last year, the Hong Kong IC, in relation to the requirements of the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme, we required that $3 million to be invested in a Hong Kong IC out of 30 million. But after that day, the Hong Kong SC announced that after going through the selection process, 4 firms have been appointed. So there are, under the CIES, in relation to the 600 million, 4 investment firms are involved in investment. The scope of investments covers low-altitude economy, gerund technology, smart living technology, as well as other areas. What I'm trying to say is that we follow market practices. If there are new projects, if we can identify firms that can make better investment decisions, then we will consider the personnel, the investment teams, and performance to make a decision. Once a decision is made, we will make it public. Thank you. Dr. Ho Yi Lee. Thank you, President. My question is similar to the second question asked. Well, if it is found that some partners have yet to make any investments or have not invested in companies related to Hong Kong or those relating to INT, is there a mechanism to take back the funds dispensed? If there is no such exit mechanism, will the government consider putting one in place? Secretary. A number of members asked about how we handle the relationship with the partners. At the time of this selection, we will consider their experience and capabilities of fulfilling our requirements. We consider the persons in charge, whether they can meet the rate of return and whether they can source financial return and identify projects that will bring employment opportunities or R&D growth. The Hong Kong IC has been talking to the partners to make sure that they meet our goals set out in the contract. The Hong Kong IC itself is new. There are firms that have the capability to invest, but the goal may not be entirely related to Hong Kong, that is with the Hong Kong nexus. So if they can consider more factors, say apart from rate of return, whether they can bring economic benefit to Hong Kong, say manufacturing lines or production lines, as well as job opportunities, we will take that into account. We will look at the medium and long-term investment. Then why do we have to focus on the short term of these firms? Our positioning is medium to long term, so we need to assess the performance of the partners in their medium to and long term goal. But it doesn't mean that the Hong Kong IC will give them a free rein and will be laid back. As I said, that they follow market practices. If there are changes in the personnel in the partners, and if these changes have an impact on the investment decisions, and if these people are considered to be important in their decision, we have the power to make changes. So that there is an exit mechanism and there is a mechanism to make changes. Mr. Dominic Lee. Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you. The goal of the Hong Kong GP is to attract enterprises to come to Hong Kong and to promote diversification in our economy. There are 8 firms selected. I'm sure that they are well-known major corporations. Now, development of industries in Hong Kong may not be their focus. In relation to the uninvested funds in the Hong Kong GP, will you select companies that know Hong Kong well and have roots in Hong Kong? Will you select companies with a major business in Hong Kong or one that is related to Hong Kong? Secretary. Well, it is related to our original intention of the inception of the fund and the additional funds. We consider the projects with the Hong Kong nexus and the benefits it will bring to Hong Kong in the medium to long term. That is our principle. The partners that are big firms, do they not have experience in Hong Kong? We consider their experience. On the 30th of December, the Hong Kong IC has made changes in relation to the $600 million under the schemes different firms have been selected. They are not small firms, but they are not the ones that you often heard of. We stick to our principle and the original intention in the identification of firms. It's not because of where they come from. The most important thing is whether they can meet our policy objective and meet our requirements.
Question 5. Mrs. Regina IP. Thank you, President. Thank you, President. It has been stipulated in Chapter 3 of the Basic Law a series of fundamental rights, including basic human rights enjoyed by Hong Kong residents. On the other hand, the Court of Final Appeal, CFA, established a 4-step proportionality test for balancing basic human rights in the case of Hysan Development Company Limited and others versus Town Planning Board in 2016, and CFA reaffirmed the aforesaid test last year in the 2 cases of Nick Invenger versus the Hong Kong Housing Authority HA and Lee Yik-ho versus HA. In this connection, will the government inform this council 1. of the number of judicial review cases filed with the court in the past 5 years in respect of the government's alleged excessive restriction of basic human rights, and among such cases, the respective numbers and percentages of those cases in which the government had won and lost, as well as a breakdown of the legal costs incurred by the government, the respective litigation costs needed to be paid by the government in respect of such unsuccessful cases, and 2, whether there were cases in the past in which the government insisted on lodging appeals despite considering that the cases would have a low success rate after taking into account the aforesaid test. If so, all the factors taken into account by the government in insisting on lodging the appeals, how the government will hold the officials concerned accountable for such unsuccessful cases in the future. Secretary for Justice. President, concerning the question raised by Mrs. Regina IP, my reply is as follows. After reviewing relevant records and weeding out judicial review JR cases related to non-refoulement claims, the Department of Justice and DOJ has arrived at a figure of 61 cases in total involving the applicants' allegations against the government for imposing excessive restriction of fundamental human rights among the JR cases filed with the court in the past 5 years. The yearly breakdown is as follows: 2020, 7 cases, 2021, 14 cases, 2022, 18 cases, 2023, 10 cases, and 2024, 12 cases. Among the 61 cases above, there were 14 cases pending the judgment of the CFI, while there were 42 cases in which the CFI or a higher court ruled in favor of the government or held that the government did not impose disproportionate or excessive restriction of fundamental rights, or the pertinent JR applications were withdrawn by the applicants. There were 5 cases in which the court ruled against the government on the ground of excessive restriction of fundamental rights or were settled upon the government making concessions. The legal expenses incurred by the government in respect of the above cases mainly involve staff costs of DOJ for handling the cases, costs for briefed-out counsel, if any, who acted for the government, and the expenses on payment of litigation costs to applicants, if applicable. We have not kept statistics on the legal expenses incurred by the DOJ staff in handling the cases in question. Based on the available information, in respect of the 61 cases, the annual average fees payable to briefed-out counsel acting for the government and the annual average litigation costs payable to applicants by the government are around 3.89 million Hong Kong dollars and $119,000 respectively. In general, litigation costs will be awarded in favor of the government when the court ruled in favor of the government in JR cases, and these costs will be payable by the applicants and are not necessarily borne entirely by public funds. When a costs order is made in favor of the government in specific cases, such litigation costs will cover 1. DOJ staff costs, including professional fees, and 2. fees of outside legal services, such as fees for briefed-out counsel. In respect of the 61 cases, the government has been awarded litigation costs in a total sum of around $4.15 million. As for the above 5 cases of which the outcome was not in favor of the government, the fees payable by the government to the briefed out counsel acting on his behalf and the litigation costs payable to the applicants totaled around $922,000. 2. The proportionality test established by the Court of Final Appeal CFA is a very complex legal concept aimed at determining whether restrictions on human rights and freedoms caused by certain administrative decisions, policy, or legal provisions are reasonable. The test involves 4 steps. 1. What is the aim of the restriction? Is it a legitimate aim? 2. If so, is the restriction rationally connected to that legitimate aim? 3. Whether the restriction is proportionate to achieving the legitimate aim and not excessive. And 4. Are the societal benefits brought by the policy or measure reasonably balanced against the protection of individual rights? The appropriate application of the proportionality test in individual cases often generates considerable controversy and is not a simple clear-cut legal issue. Whenever faced with JR cases involving fundamental human rights, the DOJ first thoroughly discerns the background and purpose of the impound decision, policy, or legal provision from the relevant policy bureau, and provide legal advice to the relevant policy bureau after careful consideration and legal research. When significant issues are encountered, the government often seeks further advice from independent local or overseas barristers. Every decision and strategy in litigation is only made after the relevant policy bureau consulted DOJ and considered a basket of factors. Accurately assessing the outcome of litigation is already quite challenging, but more importantly, the likelihood of success is not the only consideration, but just one of many considerations. There is in particular the need to take into account the overall public interest, such as the potential political, social, and economic impacts, as well as the profound effects on the use and allocation of limited and valuable public resources if the JR is successful. Every decision made by the government and every policy formulated, including those approved by the Executive Council, as well as every piece of legislation proposed by the government and passed by the Legislative Council, has undergone careful scrutiny, and it is truly believed to be in compliance with fundamental human rights and freedoms. Therefore, when faced with JR cases, as a responsible government, it is generally necessary to put forward this case with conviction and clearly explain the government's positions to the court and the public. Of course, some cases are more challenging, but there are still ample reasons for the government to stand firm on defending its position in legal proceedings. First, for significant issues, an appeal process must be undergone so as to obtain a final and authoritative ruling on the issue in dispute. More significantly, the most important aspect of litigation, aside from the outcome, is the reasoning of the judgments. Even if the court ultimately rules against the government, it is crucial to understand the reasons behind the judgment. This is very important for the government's next steps and plans. The government must first understand and discern why the court holds that a certain decision, policy, or legal provision does not meet certain human rights requirements before it proceeds to make a new decision, formulate new policies, or put forward legislative or amendment proposals. This is something a responsible government must do. Otherwise, it would be difficult to provide adequate explanations to the public, the Executive Council, and the Legislative Council. In fact, even in the past cases involving fundamental human rights where the court ultimately ruled against the government, the court never criticized the government for abusing legal procedures or acting unreasonably, wasting resources or time. In the future, whenever the government makes any decision, formulates any policy, or makes any legislative proposals, it will certainly strive to ensure compliance with the fundamental human rights and freedoms protected by the Basic Law. Mrs. Regina IP. I'm glad to hear from the DOJ that among 61 cases, only 8% of the cases, in these cases, the government was ruled not in favor. The average litigation costs total millions of dollars instead of tens of millions of dollars. There are King's Councils as well as other categories of counsel involved in the Nick Infinger case. I want to ask the government, I agree with the DOJ for some more complex cases and for significant issues, appeal process must be undergone in order to obtain a final and authoritative ruling on the issue in dispute. In the recent 2 years, in relation to JR cases, there has been a minor decrease. I'm not sure if it was due to the inability to receive legal aid. If the appellant cannot seek an authoritative and final ruling owing to financial difficulty, is the DOJ concerned that this will undermine the JR system? The Secretary for Justice. Thank you, President. Regarding Mrs. Regina Ip's question, the decrease in the number is due to different factors. We didn't analyze the decrease. This is not under the purview of the DOJ. According to the legal aid system, there's a basic requirement. Apart from the means test, one has to prove that the case is reasonably arguable. This is not an exceptionally high threshold. It is just to ensure that all Hong Kong people, as long as they have arguable grounds, can seek clarifications in relation to legal grounds, and that is access to court enshrined in the Basic Law. I believe this right has not been undermined in any way, so I don't believe any change in the figures will affect the right to access to court enjoyed by Hong Kong people. We enjoy a high level of rule of law. Any reasonable argument in relation to the rule of law can be argued in the court, and the court can make an independent decision. Mr. Dominic Lee. Thank you, President. I'd like to ask about the figures contained in the reply. They don't really add up. In the main reply, in the past 5 years, on average, the expenses are $3.89 million. However, most of the litigations are ruled in favor of the government, totaling 69%. In relation to litigation costs, among 61 cases, the government were only awarded $4.15 million, but you spent about $4 million or so. So where's the discrepancy? The Secretary for Justice. There are a few reasons. The government does not necessarily have the litigation costs even if the court rules in favor of the government. At the outset of the applications, probably the court already rejected applications for JR. So the court doesn't necessarily award costs to the government out of legal principles. Even if the court rules that the applicant needs to pay litigation costs to the government, there is a process of taxation. A master in the court needs to decide on the amount of litigation costs payable by the applicant. From my experience, the litigation costs are about 60% or 70%, that is the amount payable by the applicant. So it's a normal phenomenon to have discrepancies, as the member observed. Mr. Dennis Leung. The Secretary mentioned whenever faced with JR cases involving fundamental basic rights, DOJ first thoroughly discerns the background and purpose on the decision, policy, or legal provision from the relevant policy bureau. After careful consideration and analysis, the DOJ will provide legal advice to the policy bureaus. In relation to significant issues, the DOJ often seeks further advice from independent local or overseas barristers. I'd like to know what mechanism is in place in relation to appeal mechanisms? And what is the role of the Policy Bureau in question? I'd like to speak on the division of work between the DOJ and the policy bureaus. As I mentioned in my reply, every challenged policy, legal provision, policy bureaus need to tell the DOJ the background and the policy intent, as well as the aim that you intended to achieve. Policy bureaus also need to collect evidence to be submitted to the DOJ. After the DOJ understands the background and the set of facts behind the issue in question, then we can provide legal advice in relation to the challenged policy or legal provision to see whether they breach any fundamental basic rights. We have to understand the policy intent behind the policy. Is the restriction proportionate? Is there any alternative? Has a good balance been struck? These are factual questions. We have to seek instructions from policy bureaus, or we collect information from them in relation to whether to proceed with the appeal. After collecting all the information we have to make a legal assessment. Say, are the grounds not reasonable enough? We also need to take into account a basket of factors. If the challenged policy or legal provision, if the challenges are successful, will there be profound impacts on society? Will there be any impact on the use as well as allocation of resources in society? Afterwards, the DOJ will make a collective decision together with the policy bureaus in question. Ms. Kaman Khan. Thank you, President. From the figures provided by the DOJ, it is not difficult to find that in relation to the JR cases involving fundamental basic rights in the past 5 years, 42 cases or 69% of these cases were successful. I mean, they were ruled in favor of the government. In relation to same-sex couple fundamental rights, the court ruled not in favor of the government. In relation to same-sex fundamental human rights, there is a view that the government shouldn't continue to proceed with the appeal in order to not waste public funds. In relation to seeking a final and authoritative ruling on the issue in dispute in order that the government can follow up on the issue, and the other point is that the government, as a responsible government, needs to stand firm on defending its position in order to level with the public. We have a fiscal deficit right now. Is there any impact on these two viewpoints? Just now, Ms. Carmen Khan mentioned the fiscal position of the government. As a general principle, in handling legal proceedings on the part of the DOJ, when public funds are involved, we adopt the same principle. That is, we exercise caution. We go by the above-mentioned two policies, which I believe are applicable to all cases. We won't adopt different standards in relation to different cases. In appeal cases, when taken to the Court of Final Appeal, one has to obtain a final and authoritative ruling. We need to make sure that we use public resources with caution. For cases going to the CFA, we don't have the right to directly go to the CFA. The CFA accepts cases based on two principles. One, the cases need to involve widespread, significant public interest. Two, the courts need to agree that the relevant appeal grounds are reasonably arguable. If the Court of Appeal or the CFA or the appeal committee thinks that the appeal grounds are not reasonable and they are not arguable, the cases won't be taken to the Court of Final Appeal. In relation to the type of cases mentioned, if you have read the rulings or judgments, we cannot generalize the situation. The policy intention varies from one to another. If the policy leads to a curtailment of human rights, is the curtailment unreasonable, disproportionate? We will have to look into the policy in order to make a decision. Policies vary from one to another. The appeal grounds lodged by the applicant are not one single argument. There are a handful of appeal grounds. Even if the court doesn't rule in favor of the government, it doesn't mean that the court accepts all appeal grounds put forward by the applicant. So in answer to Ms. Carmen Khan's question, if the court thinks what we do is not sufficient or deficient, then we can consider how we can amend the legislative proposals or make legislative proposals in order to plug the gap. What I mentioned is applicable to all cases. Thank you.
Last question seeking an oral reply. Mr. LAI Tung-kwok. President, in its paper submitted to this Council in 2023 on amending the Supplementary Medical Professions Ordinance, the government proposed to enable in the first phase radiographers, RGs, and medical laboratory technologists and LTs working in the Chinese medicine hospital to accept referrals from CMP's Chinese medicine practitioners, also working therein for providing patients with relevant tests and examinations. However, some are of the view that as all registered CMPs have obtained their qualifications and are subject to regulation, it is unreasonable to determine the right of referral on the basis of job positions rather than qualifications. In this connection, will the government inform this Council, 1. of the justifications for determining the right of referral on the basis of the job positions rather than the qualifications of CMPs, 2. given that it is learned that the Chinese Medicine Council of Hong Kong and its Chinese Medicine Practitioners Board CMPB would discuss the issue of fully implementing the practice of enabling RGs and MLTs to accept referrals from registered CMPs and put forward recommendations thereafter of the progress of the relevant discussions and the timetable for putting forward specific recommendations. And 3, in order to promote interdisciplinary collaboration in healthcare services among CMPs and supplementary medical professionals, whether it has taken the initiative to discuss with various professional medical groups to clarify and rationalize the processes, responsibilities, and obligations of CMPs in the referral process. If so, of the details. If not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Health. President, I provide a consolidated reply to the question raised by Mr. LAI Tung-kwok as follows. The government is committed to providing service and professional development of Chinese medicine in Hong Kong to strengthen the role of CM in the overall healthcare system. With the continuous development of different CM service modes, it is anticipated that there will be more collaboration and interaction between CMPs and other healthcare professionals on primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare services. Interdisciplinary collaboration is a megatrend of healthcare services development. It is the required professional competency and responsibility of healthcare professionals to make appropriate referrals as and when necessary. Although the current legislation does not restrict CMPs from making referrals for patients in need, some professions do not allow healthcare professionals such as RGs to accept referrals from CMPs. In this connection, the government intends to provide a clear legal basis for supplementary healthcare professionals to accept referrals from CMPs through legislative amendments to the Supplementary Medical Professions Ordinance, Chapter 359, to rationalize the referral mechanisms between various professions and demonstrate the policy direction of promoting interdisciplinary collaboration across healthcare professions. Professional autonomy and safeguarding patients' interests are two important principles in the regulation and development of healthcare professions. Regarding the proposal on the use of modern technologies and techniques by CMPs to facilitate diagnosis and treatment in the course of their practice, the government should adopt the relevant principles, and the CM profession and relevant healthcare professions should reach consensus before implementation. Specifically, the CM profession should first ascertain the required standards of knowledge, skills, professional competence, and conduct, etc., with thorough consultation with stakeholders of the relevant healthcare professions during the process. Meanwhile, the CM profession should also ensure that CMPs receive adequate and appropriate professional training and clearly understand the professional requirements, including follow-up to relevant diagnoses and the associated professional and legal liabilities to safeguard patient safety and interests. After a consensual proposal is formed, the statutory councils or boards of the CM profession and relevant healthcare professions should deliberate on the specific procedures and mechanisms, and both parties should further promulgate or revise relevant codes or guidelines before implementing the specific referral arrangements. The Health Bureau plans to submit the legislative proposals for amending the Supplementary Medical Professions Ordinance to the Council in the first half of 2025. The amendments include allowing RGs and MLTs to accept referrals from CMPs. When the relevant amendment ordinance takes effect, those specific referral arrangements could be implemented upon completion of the aforementioned discussions and preparatory work, such as revision of the relevant codes of practice by the statutory boards or councils of the CM profession and the relevant healthcare professions. Mr. LAI Tung-kwok's specific question relating to Chinese Medicine Hospital. The first Chinese medicine hospital in Hong Kong will commence services by phases from end 2025. Being the flagship institution in Chinese medicine, the circumstances within the hospital is distinctly different from the current CM services, mainly provided at the community level, in terms of clinical needs of patients in diagnosis and treatment. And there is a practical need for and sufficient capacity for interdisciplinary referrals to be made within the hospital. As the Chinese Medicine Hospital will provide CM predominant secondary and tertiary healthcare services, it is expected that the conditions of inpatients are expected to be more complicated than those of outpatients and will require interdisciplinary collaboration in terms of clinical diagnosis and treatment, including more frequent support by diagnostic, radiology, and pathology services. The Chinese Medicine Hospital will also put in place a robust clinical governance structure, as well as guidelines and mechanisms for clinical diagnosis, audit, and risk assessment. The hospital will also be supported by multidisciplinary teams comprising CMPs, doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals. There will also be a comprehensive set of medical equipment and training mechanism, as well as stringent management on healthcare standards and risks. Therefore, the legislative proposal shall take effect immediately to enable RGs and MLTs in the context of the Chinese Medicine Hospital to accept referrals from CMPs to ensure smooth collaboration between CMPs and other professionals within the hospital. As regards the second and third parts of the question, to facilitate the communication between CMPs and supplementary medical professionals, as well as professional discussion on issues arising from interdisciplinary collaboration, in December 2023, the Health Bureau took the initiative to issue an invitation to the Chinese Medicine Council of Hong Kong and its CMPB for setting up a working group to initiate professional discussions on the referral of patients by CMPs for diagnostic imaging and laboratory tests. The working group has conducted an in-depth study on matters including the core professional competencies required, training needs, and associated medical professional liabilities of CMPs for making such referrals, and has plans to develop reference standards and formulate relevant guidelines. As a next step, the working group will meet with bodies of Western medicine and relevant supplementary healthcare professions to discuss relevant details and related arrangement to forge a consensus. In addition, the Health Bureau since mid-2024 has held 9 meetings to brief and exchange views with stakeholders from various sectors on the legislative amendments to the Supplementary Medical Professions Ordinance, including the CMPB, the Chinese Medicine Development Blueprint Subcommittee, and its relevant working groups, as well as the Primary Health Care Committee. The Health Bureau also consulted the Supplementary Medical Professions Council, SMP Council, and its boards, including the Radiographers Board and the MLT Board. The SMP Council and the boards of the 2 professions were of the view that, as a prerequisite for implementing the legislative proposal, consensus must be reached on a wide spectrum of issues between RG, MLT, and CM professions in relation to making referrals, including the training requirements of CMPs, the scope of referrals, the duties and responsibilities of RGs, MLTs, and CMPs, as well as the follow-up arrangements, so as to ensure the orderly implementation of the referral arrangements to safeguard patient safety to the greatest extent. The Health Bureau will continue to facilitate communication between stakeholders from various professions and will closely follow the situation with a view to making appropriate arrangements and coordination in respect of legislative amendments. Thank you, Mr. LAI Tung-kwok. The third part of the reply says that there are some key principles that the government adopts, and they would wait until the CM profession and the relevant healthcare professions reach consensus. And the Secretary seems to have ignored how in Chapter 138 the Health Bureau has the responsibility to promote collaboration within the healthcare sector. The problem with the right of deferral being based on job positions rather than qualifications of CMPs, this would also undermine the right of the people to be entitled to fair treatment. So, can the Secretary explain whether in the amendments to the Supplementary Medical Professions Ordinance to have supplementary medical professionals accept referrals from CMPs, and the detailed implementation proposals would have the working group formulate the specific proposals without intervention. Thank you. Secretary. As I said earlier, the work of the Chinese Medicine Hospital is quite different from the Chinese medical practice on a community level. So when we're trying to facilitate referral arrangements with the supplementary medical professions, we believe the Chinese Medicine Hospital can take the first step in making referrals, because the referrals would be made within the hospital, and there is governance structure in relation to the hospital, as well as there are already multidisciplinary teams within the hospital. As for the general CM profession in Hong Kong and the referrals to be made between them and other healthcare professions, we need to wait until the CM profession delineate the relevant standards and arrangements. We also need to respect the views of other healthcare professions, especially those of the RGs as well as MLTs, on their collaboration with the CM profession. I don't think it clashes with the fundamental human rights available to the public in accordance with the basic law. It is more important to safeguard patient safety and the quality of healthcare services. Thank you. Mr. Holden Chow. It is said that referrals can only be made between healthcare professions within the Chinese medicine hospital. I think there is too much restriction because it seems that qualified RGs and MLTs cannot accept referrals from registered CMPs outside the hospital. Why? Why is there differential treatment? I think it is somewhat unfair. I just want to clarify if that is the case and if I understand it wrong. Well, indeed, you understand, Mr. Hon Chow, you have understood it wrong. Yes, I really have to clarify this. I think Mr. Hon Chow's understanding is wrong. We are trying to facilitate referrals, and in fact, there is no restriction on CMPs making referrals. It's just that RGs and MLTs cannot accept referrals from CMPs. And once legislative amendments take effect, RGs and MLTs will be able to accept referrals from CMPs. But the timing for acceptance by the RGs and MLTs, we have to leave it to the professions to formulate the relevant guidelines and promulgate the relevant requirements, as well as delineate their professional liabilities. But there are mechanisms in place for the professions. And within the Chinese medicine hospital, there is no need to wait for the professions to formulate the relevant requirements or guidelines. The Chinese medicine hospital has a governance structure that would allow them to determine their model of collaboration and their specific clinical guidelines. So there is a special context within the Chinese medicine hospital compared to the community in general. Thank you. Dr. David Lam. With the proposed amendments passed, RGs and MLTs will be able to accept referrals from CMPs, but then at first, as the secretary said, it would be only within the Chinese medicine hospital. Later on, even though it may be allowed, there may still be restrictions. So RGs and MLTs are standard setters for diagnostic tests and lab tests. If Chinese medicine practitioners make referrals without acceptance by the professions, would it constitute a failure on the part of the CMPs in meeting their relevant professional standards? Secretary. The member highlighted an important issue. That's why we have been asking the CM profession to work with other healthcare professions on this. Some members talked often that it is a right, but it is more about the responsibility involved. It's not just about referrals being made. It is about afterward, if something happens, what is the liability? What are the follow-up responsibilities? And if practitioners fail to do certain things, would it constitute failure on their part to perform their professional duties? We are now trying to propose legislative amendments to remove the restrictions for certain healthcare professions to accept referrals from CMPs, but the detailed implementation would have to depend on a consensus reached between the different professions. Otherwise, it could constitute a risk to patient safety. Thank you. Professor Chen Wing-kwong, thank you. The Chinese medicine profession has expressed concerns that about the two-phase approach, but from the reply, it seems that the Secretary is stubborn in taking the two-phase approach. That is, with the legislative amendments having passed, it is only within the Chinese medicine hospital that referrals can be made. And referrals outside the hospital will not be accepted at all in the first phase. It will cause a misunderstanding for members of the public, thinking that the CM profession is not as proficient. So can we have, instead of a two-phase approach, a one-phase approach that all of the amendments will be proposed at the same time, and registered CMPs even outside the Chinese medicine hospital would be able to make referrals, even if you are not having same timing for CMPs inside and outside the Chinese medicine hospital to make referrals. You should at least provide for timing. Thank you, Secretary. It's not that we are stubborn in taking a two-phase approach. It's just that within the Chinese medicine hospital, there will already be a governance structure. There will be a framework because it is supposed to be a multidisciplinary institution in the first place. But then we have seen differing views in the community, and we do note the views of the CM profession. After the amendments are passed, there will no longer be a restriction on RGs or MLTs, barring them from accepting referrals from CMPs. I would like to emphasize that because there is a special context within the Chinese medicine hospital that would already require interdisciplinary collaboration that would facilitate referrals being made. With the healthcare professions having completed their preparatory work, we would more than welcome to have referral arrangements made from CMPs to healthcare professions. If they have reached a consensus before the commissioning of the Chinese medicine hospital, that would already be they would already be able to have referral arrangements made. Ms. Nixie Lam. So there is no restriction on the part of CMPs to make referrals to healthcare professions, it seems, from the reply. But then there are restrictions on healthcare professions accepting referrals from CM profession. I understand it may be a problem of responsibility, but can the Health Bureau promote collaboration between the healthcare professions to actively take forward the relevant arrangements? Secretary, we are not barring healthcare professions from accepting referrals from CMPs. In fact, the CM profession lacked the requisite training or demand to make such referrals in the first place before. And in fact, referrals being made by CMPs to healthcare professions, this proposal was only made recently. And we do have, for historical reasons, a restriction on the healthcare professions, RGs and MLTs to accept referrals from the CMPs. We will remove the restriction with legislative amendments for them to accept referrals from CMPs.
Members' motion on the period for amending subsidiary legislation. A proposed